Hi, good morning. As you can see, I am closed captioning our lesson today, and I'm doing it differently than I've been doing it the last two classes. I'm hoping that this allows students who want to move faster through today's lesson, and for people to be able to review as needed and pause as needed. So we've already learned the 4 types of macromolecules. We've already learned that these macromolecules are absolutely essential to life, and we've learned their names. And we've also learned just a little bit, we've touched on the fact that you obtain macromolecules from the food that you eat. Today, we're going to go deeper into the function of each of these macromolecules. Your goal is to understand the function of each type of macromolecule, the monomer and polymers of each macromolecule, and what elements are included, as well as any special features of each kind of macromolecule. These are your goals over today's lesson and our coming lessons. Today, we're going to focus on carbohydrates. You want to have your notes open, and we are on page 3 of your notes. I filled in part of it for you already. So what we just went over is right here. Macromolecules in living things are grouped based on their chemical composition. Each class of macromolecules serves a purpose vital to life. You may pause this video to type if you'd like. The 4 main macromolecules are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. And you obtain all the macromolecules from the food you eat. Next, we're going to go over carbohydrates, which will be on page 4 of your notes. I am not going to type them in this time. You will need to pause the video as we go over these answers. So, carbohydrates. Notice the CHO. That's because all carbohydrates contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. It's one of the ways that you can tell carbohydrates apart from proteins and lipids when you see the structure. Carbohydrates are actually usually colorless. They're usually crystals. Think of sugar. And they're usually water soluble. Water soluble simply means that they dissolve in water. Think of sugar, for example. Monomers of carbohydrates have a 1 carbon to 2 hydrogen to 1 oxygen ratio. That's a 1-to-1 ratio. It's important because lipids also contain only carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but in different ratios. So one of the ways to tell a carbohydrate from a lipid is from the elemental ratio. So the monomer of carbohydrates is monosaccharides. And the second A in here is not correct. It should not be there. Okay? Or it should be over here. I can't remember which way it goes. Remember, mono means 1. Saccharide actually means sugar. So monosaccharide is a single sugar. The polymer of carbohydrates are either disaccharides or polysaccharides. What does poly mean again? Think about it. If you thought many, you are correct. Poly means many. What does saccharide mean again? If you thought sugar, you are correct. Don't forget to fill in this on your student notes right here. We're going to go on to our next slide. So carbohydrates are classified in groups based on the number of different monomers. So we have monosaccharides, which have one monomer, disaccharides, which have two monomers, and polysaccharides, which have three or more monomers. All right, the di in disaccharide actually means two. Now I want you to look at this picture. How many monomers do you think there are here? Notice the rings. How many rings do you see? If you said two, you are correct. There are two rings, and therefore there are two monomers here, connected together or bonded together. I also want to point out to you right now that although you don't see all the carbons are here. They are at every point in the ring. So right here, there's a carbon. Right here, there's a carbon. Right here, there's a carbon. Here and here. That makes 5 carbons, and then branched off is a 6th carbon. All right. Don't forget to fill this in on your notes right here. And let's continue on. Functions of carbohydrates. First, let me point out there are actually 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 functions of carbohydrates. All right, that you need to know. The first is probably the most important of the 4, and that is because it is a readily available source of short-term energy. You actually all know this. When you are tired, what's the kind of food that you grab? If you said pop or soda, if you said candy, if you said chocolate, all right, any of those are all carbohydrates and contain sugar, right? Or think about your parents when your little siblings are running around. Do your parents make sure that they can't have any sugar late at night? Because that's what gives them more energy and makes them run all around. So my mom did not allow me to have sugar after a certain time of day or right before a nap, for example, if I was really young. The second function of carbohydrates is energy storage. So in animals, it's different than in plants in this case. So animals have a molecule called glycogen. It's a polysaccharide that stores energy in animals in their liver and muscle cells. Starch is the energy storage in plants. So think of starchy foods, for example, like potatoes. Potatoes are full of starch. All right. So that is where the plant is storing its energy. And we eat the potatoes for energy as well. All right. We were basically stealing the plant's energy source. That's what we're doing. The third function of carbohydrates is structural. So cell walls in bacteria, plants, and fungi all contain carbohydrates for helping with that function. And then there's something called exoskeletons. Exoskeletons are the outermost area of insects, arthropods, and crustaceans. They're hard outer shells. Think of the crunch of insects. Or when you eat a lobster, okay, you have to break open that shell. That's the exoskeleton, and it is made of carbohydrates. Fourth is the component, hey, gremlin. Okay. 4, components of glycoproteins. Glycoproteins are found in the cell membrane. And basically, it is a macromolecule that is made up of both proteins and carbohydrates bonded together. And they're very important to the function of a cell membrane, which, don't forget, is a very important function of controlling what goes in the cell and what comes out of the cell. So you're going to put these notes over here. And the next thing we're going to go over is monosaccharides. So your notes end here, and we'll continue with monosaccharides. Monosaccharides, another name for them are simple sugars. All right, they're the simplest molecules of carbohydrates because they contain a single monomer. Examples of them are glucose, galactose, and fructose. All of them have the same formula, C6H12O6. Remember how we learned of the ratio? If you were to divide all of these by 6, 6 divided by 6 would be 1. 12 divided by 6 would be 2. 6 divided by 6 would be 1. So the ratio of carbon to hydrogen to oxygen is 1 to 1. All right? 1 to 1. Now, they all have the same formula, but they're actually made differently. All right? And we will talk about that at the very bottom. So, first of all, glucose is blood sugar. It's an immediate source of energy for cellular respiration. It's actually in your blood and it can be measured. Especially people that are diabetic have to measure their blood sugar. So, glucose travels around in your blood to your cells so that your cells can get energy immediately from the glucose. Fructose is a sugar found in fruits and honey. And galactose is a sugar found in some dairy products and is synthesized in the body. Do you remember what the word synthesis means? If you said to make, you are correct. So although they all share the same formula, they actually have different structures. They don't look exactly the same when you really look at them up close. For example, glucose has hydrogen here and the OH group down here on this side, if you can see this. But down in galactose, okay, they switch spots, right? The OH is on top and the H is on the bottom. So it's a small difference. And the same thing is said on this side, all right? Fructose is even more different. If you can notice down here, the CH2OH is actually coming off a different carbon. And notice how it's kind of formulated differently here with the point being up here. They're all slightly different in structure. They're called structural isomers, but I'm not going to quiz you on the word structural isomer. That's more for chemistry. Don't forget to fill this in on your notes under monosaccharides. Page 6 is the beginning of disaccharides. Disaccharides contain two monosaccharides chemically combined, producing new carbohydrates with new chemical and physical properties. What that means is glucose is different both chemically and physically from maltose, even though maltose is made up of two glucose molecules combined. Even though glucose is in maltose, they don't react the same chemically, and they actually physically look different from each other. Very important for you to understand. All right. There's a name for the bond in between monosaccharides, and it is called the glycosidic bond. All right. So we have maltose, sucrose, and lactose. Maltose is actually a product of starch digestion, so the breakdown of starch. And malt or beer sugar. So this is what is found in malt or beer often. Okay, this is the sugar that's in there, is maltose. Lactose is actually the sugar found in milk, and it is a combination of galactose and glucose combined. Sucrose is your common table sugar, the white stuff that you put in your, tea or coffee or Kool-Aid. And it's also what you use when you bake a lot of times. And it is a combination of glucose and fructose. Don't forget to fill this in on your notes. And we're going to now start number 10, polysaccharides. Polysaccharides are complex carbohydrates that can be 3 or more monosaccharides bonded together. When you look at this picture, how many monosaccharides are combined in this picture? If you said 4, you are correct. There is 1, 2, 3, 4. So our polysaccharides, just so you know, can be much longer than this. They can be hundreds of molecules combined to make a polysaccharide. Glycogen is what we talked about before. It is a storage of extra glucose in animals, and it's stored mostly in skeletal muscle and the liver. Starch is another polymer of glucose. It is the energy storage in plants. Cellulose is the name of the polymer that is used to build cell walls for plants and bacteria and gives plants strength and flexibility in their cell walls. Chitin, I know that sounds weird, but chitin is actually the name of the polysaccharide used in insects, other arthropods, and crustaceans. It is what is used in their exoskeleton. And fungi also use chitin in their cell walls. Don't forget to fill this in on your notes. That is the end of our carbohydrate notes. You will fill this in on your notes. Then you will watch a video on Edpuzzle to review what we just talked about. And then finally, you will end with an Edpuzzle. Sorry, not an Edpuzzle. You will end with a Kahoot reviewing this information.